Okay. Recently was asked in my last my review of WrestleMania to speak about I guess about my history with wrestling. Well, I was introduced to wrestling by my mother's aunt, who was born in 1897. um, she was a wonderful old lady. Uh, my mother's aunt was such a beautiful woman. She really was. Uh, her favorite type of wrestling was, uh, well, at the time it was called midget wrestling. It was like little people. It was literally called midget wrestling. That was the name of it. They still do it down in Mexico quite a bit. I'm not sure exactly. They call them the minis down in Mexico, where they dress them up like the full size wrestlers. Then they got the minis, and then they got the ones that are in between, just short people that are pro wrestlers. But yeah, she was the one that really introduced me to it when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Then around that time was the beginning of the Hulkamania era of pro wrestling. I wasn't as much about being a fan of Hulk Hogan as I was more about King Kong Bundy, Roddy Piper, wrestlers that were on the heel side. I always enjoyed the heels. I always thought heels were more fun to watch. They were more entertaining. How else are you gonna do this? I was a fan of my father. Also, with my father, was friends with a couple wrestlers when they from back in the 50s and 60s, when it was just coming out of the side shows of the different circuses at the time. And I had a couple people I called uncle that were pro wrestlers, but I never really got to follow much of their careers because I was born in the 70s. Like I said, by the time I really was getting full-fledged into becoming a fan, it was the WWF and NWA and AWA were all the big things. The AWA was on ESPN. I watched that every afternoon on ESPN. I watched NWA when I had an opportunity, when they showed that on some of the other channels we had, because we had early cable when I had the push buttons on the box. So we had a lot of that. When NWA kind of started to break off and they started melding more into the Northeast, it became more along the lines where NWA became WCW, and then there was WWF, WCW. I was in high school by the time there was really the beginning of what would become the resurgence in the mid to late 90s. I was already graduated from high school by 1994. I was starting to train to become a pro wrestler. I spent 7 years doing it, but I was kind of brought into wrestling on a different level because that was around the beginning of what became Extreme Championship Wrestling, when it was Eastern Championship Wrestling. I saw a lot of the original ECWs before it became Extreme. Then when it became Extreme, that was the style I was doing around the New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania areas. I spent a little bit of time doing that stuff myself, and I just mainly got behind my own career for the 7 years I'd done it. I followed a lot of WCW, a lot of the WWF, and ECW was like my favorite during that time because it was different. It was the heavy metal of wrestling. It was the gangsta of pro wrestling. It was different. In the 80s, I was more, like I said, of a fan of the heels. Big John Studd, Kamala, George the Animal Steel, rest in peace. They were the ones I really enjoyed watching, was the heels. And when I began wrestling, I started using the name Casey Jones, and I was more along the lines of a heelish, not care about anybody but myself type of character. I got some scars on my head here. There's one, I don't know if you can see it there. I got some over here on my eye. I got scars all over my body. They came from a lot of, I even got the one right here. You can see it slightly through there. That was actually the wildest. There used to be these white plastic slides used to put into these microwave ovens, and somebody swung one at me and literally just sliced me right through there. It was just such a wild thing. Luckily, I didn't get hit in the eyes. The one in my eye here, that one's been opened up. I couldn't tell you how many times. This was from a 2x4. Long story, I'm not getting into that. You can see some of the scars right in here. That one there was a scar. If I could get it with the right light, you see how it looks like I was missing a piece of skin there. I really wasn't. It's just the way it healed after. But yeah, it was like a flap, and it came back and eventually worked its way back as it healed. Then in the 90s, when I was doing my wrestling, I was doing everything from backyards to barns to farms. I did everything you could think of, just to make people happy. I can't remember half the companies I worked for because I worked for so many. I did do a little things at the old ECW arena, helping out backstage. Never really got on camera. Did a couple little dark match things I used to have where I was like the local guy, got the shit beat out of me a couple times at the old Blackwood CYO. Anybody who knows about the Blackwood CYO, Blackwood, New Jersey, right across from Camden County College. I did a couple there. That's where I got hit with the 2x4. You see right there and there. As far as my love of wrestling, like I said, it goes back to my mother's aunt. Back when I was 4 and 5 years old, she telling me about these midget wrestlers. I know midget's not a good word, but that's what it was called. It's not the greatest thing. I don't agree with people being put down from a derogatory remark, but if that's what it was called at the time, that's what it was. I never looked at anybody who was a smaller person and thought that they're any different than me. My wife is 4'11", or no, 4'7", sorry. So she's not a very tall person. I love my wife to death. Her height has nothing to do with it. My mother was 4'8". I think my mom was about 4'8". My dad was 5'9". I'm 5'8", around that range. In that range. As far as the way wrestling has become, I see more of the influence of ECW in AEW, WWE, Ring of Honor, Evolve. I could go on so many different levels of wrestling out there. Even New Japan has influence from ECW. AAA, CMLL has influences from ECW. Paul Heyman created a existence for the misfit, the reject, where nobody would have been ever looked at. Paul Heyman gave him a home, gave us a place and a platform for people that were not 6'5", 6'10", 300 pounds, monsters. There was a place for them. Eric Bischoff saw that and started taking them. And WCW was the second one to be showing off these luchadors and luchadoras. Some of the greatest wrestlers I ever seen in my life were from down Mexico. Vampiro, Conan, La Parca, or L.A. Park. Sorry. I'm talking about the original La Parca, not the one that died recently. That was his cousin. Bestia 666. Psycho Clown. Hey, I'm all about the Psycho Circus, man. I love them guys. Canadian wrestling was so wonderful. I mean, you had like Bret Hart, Roddy Piper, Owen Hart. That's good. See, now you have a lot of them today. I mean, look at all the wrestlers that came out of Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal. You got like Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Edge, Christian, or Adam Copeland, Christian Cage, whatever you want to call him. I still call Edge Sexton and Hardcastle. Well, that's a long story. And you got people like Taya Valkyrie, who came out of Vancouver. You got all those people. God, Lance Storm. I don't consider Chris Jericho a Canadian wrestler, even though that's where he cut his teeth. That's where he lived most of his life. He was born in New York City, and he can say anything he wants. I know the truth. He was born in the United States. He should be a United States citizen, even though his parents were Canadian. No offense, Chris. I'm sorry. There's another one, Luther. Great Canadian wrestlers. Vampiro, also from Canada, but more along the lines of a Mexican wrestler. Taya Valkyrie, like I said, there's a lot of great Canadian wrestlers. And then we had the American guys, all from the north of the Mason-Dixon. You got anybody, like from Iowa, you got Seth Rollins. From Cincinnati, you got Jon Moxley. From Ohio, I guess around the Cleveland area, you got people like Jake something. You got, forgot one of my favorite Canadian wrestlers, Ethan Page. He's one of my favorites, he really is. Like I said, I got a lot of wrestling experience. I have a lot of history with wrestling. Like I said, I was a wrestler for a while. That's where all these scars come from. I was at the ECW show where I watched Sabu use duct tape and super glue to wrap his arm back together. It was wild, trust me. I was at the night they had when there was the fire at the ECW arena. I was there that night. There was a lot that went on, especially behind everything, the kayfabe behind it all. I was early on very adamant that kayfabe needed to go, and people needed to know more. People needed to know the behind, what the different things that you see referees do, like when they're communicating with the wrestlers about time restraints, about the finish, about keeping everything on track. Referees do a lot more than people think. They don't just sit there and count 3, or the rare occasion, the 5 count. like I said, there's a lot. My history is huge. I have a bigger history in the business than I did about the business. Um, I know a lot. I knew. I really can't go into much about my history. My history goes back to when I was little. I miss my mom's aunt. Unfortunately, she passed on. That was that. I don't know what more anybody wants. If you want to know more, drop me a message. Send me a comment. I'll tell you whatever you're asking me. If you want me to do a video where you can ask me questions, I will do any of that. I will tell you everything I know within the parameters of the business, within parameters of my connection to the business. Anything more about what's going on today, I enjoy watching ECW old videos. I enjoy AEW. I know it's more about the athleticism than it is about the story. My personal opinion about how Tony Khan's running it, I ain't gonna really get into talking about that. My personal opinion of how what's going on with Vince McMahon and his way, what he's dealing with. I'm not going to talk about that. That's not my place. That's not my expertise to know about the legal ramifications of things people do. I don't know what's going through Tony Khan's mind and why he doesn't build it another way. I'm not going to talk about why the Young Bucks decided they're going to show the All-In footage from 8 months ago and why that they've kept Jack Perry out of the ring so long is beyond me. Yes, I think Jack Perry is being a scapegoat. I think he's being blamed for a lot of stuff that happened that wasn't his fault. That's the most I'm going to say about it. Why does it matter anyway? Because now CM Punk has been WWE. He's already been injured and he's getting ready to come back soon. Who cares what happened 8 months ago at All In? The only people that seem to care are the Young Bucks and Tony Khan. That's all I'm going to say on that. Like I said, if there's anything you want to know, anything you need that you think I may have missed in my history, hey, just leave me a comment. I appreciate it if you give me a like. I really do. I'd rather have likes. If you don't want to sub, don't sub. I would appreciate a sub. Don't get me wrong. I would love to say thank you on a video to those who subscribe. Just if you hit subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment saying I subscribed, and I will thank you personally. It's just how I am. So, with that being said, not much more I can say about my history of being a fan and being a wrestler myself. Like I said, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want. I mean, I ain't going to demand it like some of these other people. Share it. Tell people you got somebody you want to talk to. Hey, I want to be as open and honest with everybody as I possibly can, okay? Peace.